I don't wish to sound mean, but in this photo, our new Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy, looks like the definition of the word gormless. Yet my silly quips aside, she is living up to that reputation in this interview where she tries that classic Labour technique. That technique is pretending they're on the side of every single quote-unquote marginalised group, thereby ignoring the inherent contradictions between the two and creating violence down the line. In a recent interview with London lefty Lovey's Politics Joe, she's trying to make out that the Labour Party are interested in safe spaces for women as well as being on board with the trans ideology.
Women need safe spaces where they are safe, where they're protected, especially for a lot of women that I represent who've experienced domestic violence. For the rest of their lives, some of those women will not feel safe, even if they're no longer at immediate risk of harm. They deserve and need the right to know that Labour is on their side and that will support them. But I don't understand how this has become a zero-sum game where their rights are pitted against trans women who are some of the most marginalised, discriminated against, victimised people in the country. We surely have got to be able to stand for both.
Now, what Miss Nandy is doing here is known as cognitive dissonance. That's holding two contradictory views at the same time. I know that because one of the key threats to modern women is letting biological men in women's spaces. However, after a quick Google search, you see that trans rape isn't exactly uncommon. Here's 3 examples from recently. A trans woman has been found guilty of raping 2 women in a Scottish prison. Here's a 19-year-old trans woman who raped someone in Guernsey. Here's a trans woman in Bristol who raped someone and also raped a child. Now, it's complete naive insanity to think that you can support both communities without the inherent conflicts arising, but at least it's just Lisa Nandy thinking this, eh?
And actually one of the positive things about this leadership campaign is the fact that Keir, Becky, me, Emily, Jess and Clive all say the same thing. Every single person who stood to be leader of the Labour Party believes in that principle.
Oh. Now, I know some people at the very heart of the woke movement are quite damaged, vindictive individuals, but most people who go on board with it, including Lisa Nandy, are just useful idiots. They believe if you're just nice to everybody, everything will be great. It's this instinct of a sort of toxic motherhood that makes lefties assume that if someone's shouting about some issue of supposed social justice, they must be right and go on board with them because it's really meaningful to them. Because they have a twisted ideology that anybody they view as a victim group is always moral and virtuous, it allows psychopaths like this young man to get through the net. Here he is fantasizing about the damage he'd like to do to so-called TERFs, they're trans-exclusionary radical feminists, basically feminists that don't go on board with the trans madness. Now, despite these insane ramblings on Twitter being far worse than anything you see from the so-called far right, what do you think happened to this young man? Well, he was made Equalities Officer for the SNP. And shortly after this, they then got thrown in jail for assaulting sexually and physically 6 young adults. Now, this is more of what you always see with the lefties. They want to be all things to all men. It's why they try and be pro-Islam and pro-LGBTQ, and it doesn't take a genius to work out you can't be pro both. Yet there is an upside to all this, in that in real time we're going to see the total collapse of the liberal leftist ideology and its inherent incoherence. I think the only thing stopping its complete collapse after the Labour Party's reign is going to be a globalist takeover of monumental scale. But perhaps that's a video for another time. In the meantime, do let me know your thoughts on this down below and do consider subscribing to the channel.